Hi, I would like to welcome you all on the session on cybersecurity policy. We have an expert on this, Mr. Clarence Xavier, Director Technology for the ABRAO group of companies. A small introduction, brief about him. In his current role with the ABRAO group, Clarence is accountable for end-to-end for all IT work executed within the company. With a total experience of over 32 years in the IT industry, Clarence has successfully managed businesses accountable for the delivery of large IT products and support contracts to clients in Europe and Canada. The responsibilities of the current and previous engagements are understanding and leveraging evolving technologies to the benefit of the organization and the clients. Over the last few years, Clarence has been focused on understanding of the evolving threats and the adoption of the industry standard countermeasures. Welcome, Mr. Clarence, and I hand over to you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vasant, for the warm welcome. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the cybersecurity policy recommendations. I don't think the word cybersecurity requires a very detailed explanation on what this term means. Many of us have seen various articles. Many of us see various communications sent out by different service providers, vendors that we engage with, different articles in the newspaper, and some probably have been unfortunate in getting impacted. So let's go through this session. I understand that there will be a question and answer session at the end. So any questions, please put it up on the chat window and hold on until we come to the Q&A session. All right.
We'll have to put the question and answers in the Q&A box and not the chat session.
Okay. All right. So stand corrected on the Q&A window. And there are about 16 slides of content. So we should have ample time to go through it and sufficient time for question and answer session. So a quick introduction on the webinar. All of us now rely on IT systems for our operations to run smoothly. Yes, at the end of the day, it is the people behind the machine that are probably more important, if not as important, in the successful running of the business. But then over the years, there's been an increasing level of automation, which means more and more work being done by computers. And hence, they are as important as the people that we have in our company. Now, what has been happening most unfortunately is, for various reasons, malicious attacks are being made on these systems within our business. And it's not just here in India, as you've seen, it's across the world. Reasons for why these attacks are there are clearly commercial, by and large. Sometimes it's just out to make a point. Sometimes it's just out to, put someone out of business. But what we have seen is the trend has been, something like a kidnap case. You take someone as a hostage. You have a ransom demand. If the ransom is paid, okay. If not, then it's going to be really difficult. And these attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated in nature, right? So as technology evolves, it provides means to counter these people, but at the same time, it also has a lot of weak points that these malicious actors exploit and leverage for their malicious intent. And what is also unfortunate is the awareness of what kind of threats that are there is relatively low, not just within our industry, but in general amongst the public, amongst other industries. The level of awareness is probably high within pockets of the industry, but if you take the industry as a whole, or even as I mentioned, the general public, awareness is very low about what these threats are, what they can do, and how it can impact them, whether it's their business or them personally. So we need to look at what safeguards we can put in to reduce the impact of these threats. And I would like to stress on the word reduce. In today's world, it is all but impossible for someone to say that, yes, I can do something that will eliminate this. We can reduce it, but not eliminate. We have seen huge organizations, multinational organizations, government companies with resources to millions and of dollars, crores of rupees for their budgets, IT budgets, still get impacted, right? So what we can look at is how we can make things difficult for these kind of hostile characters, how we can keep ourselves fairly well protected for all but the most determined, actors. So with that in mind, let us look at what are the ways we can put in some kind of protective defensive measures. Now, what I have done through this picture is to put in 4 different scenarios that here within AMTOI, our members can be probably categorized, right? We have a small office where you just have 1 or 2 people who run the business. They connect to the internet. They have some probably local software or install on their laptop or desktop, and they connect to the internet to do the bulk of their work. Then you have the medium and enterprise offices that have a relatively much higher sophisticated infrastructure setup on the IT, where they have a server in their office, they have a firewall that protects them from external attacks. Then you have organizations that have their server on a cloud, which they access them. And finally, you have some of these home-based users where while the bulk of the staff are running or working from the office, be it the small office, medium enterprise office, or where they have a cloud-based setup, some of the users or staff are working from home. So we need to look at all these scenarios and make sure that we are taking into account these various situations so that we can adequately protect ourselves. So we'll go into the medium and enterprise office, which is where things are relatively more complicated. So you will see a few technical jargon here, but my intention has been to reduce the amount of technical jargon, to avoid the mention of specific products, but to share with you in as layman terms as possible what is it that we would need to do to take adequate measures. So the first thing is, in a medium scale and enterprise level office, we need to have a firewall. So a firewall is a device that blocks almost all internet traffic from coming inside your office. And you could configure it to control what is it that should come into the office, and equally important, what kind of network traffic has to go from your office to the outside world. In most cases, just the access to HTTPS, that's the plain web, but sites that are secured are given access. Any additional access may be based on your specific requirements. Now, these firewalls are pretty complicated devices, and they come in different ranges, meaning capability and cost. All right. It's not easy for someone who's not in this line of experience to just select something and buy that. It's best that you engage a professional who will be able to understand the kind of business that you are dealing with, the number of users that are in the office, the kind of access that you require, and then recommend a firewall and get it configured. Right? Now, a firewall also has software running in it. And like any other software, it needs to be regularly updated because there could be some loopholes within that software that could be exploited, or it could be even new scenarios that need to be addressed in the software that's running in the firewalls, right? And so each of these vendors who manufacture these firewalls have regular updates of what they call firmware, which needs to be installed on the firewall. So you would typically need to have an AMC with them in order to have regularly updates being made to your firewall devices. There's no point buying a firewall, installing it, configuring it, and then forgetting about it, because over a period of time, there could be new ways that these hostile characters can find gaps and still get through the firewall. So it's important that their firmware is regularly updated. Next, if you were to have a server in the office, it's important to make sure that functionality that is not being used or accessed need to be turned off, right? Because functionality that you don't use can or may provide avenues for these hostile characters to leverage, find a loophole, get into the server, and cause damage. So it's very important that a process of hardening is done on the server in order to ensure that functionality that you don't use on the server is blocked or turned off, right? Because most of the servers, when you install them, they give you a lot of features and you may just use a handful of them. So it's important to turn off what is really not being used so that you are, not exposed unduly. The next is applications. Now, I'm sure there are many of these offices of medium scale and enterprise level offices that have developed their own software over the last few years. And this software is very specific to their business requirements. Now, the design of this software also plays a role in how secure the entire infrastructure, IT infrastructure setup is. Because even with a firewall in place, even with the server being hardened, if the software is not well written, not well designed, there are ways through which a hacker can get in and cause some kind of damage or steal data, right? Or even both. So, based on the language, software language that has been used, be it C++ or Java, PHP, and there are so many of these technologies, all of them have a number of industry-wide best practices that are recommended to be followed when an application is being written, so that there is very little or zero avenue for a determined hacker to get through and either steal data or take down the system, right? We then need to look at backups. So sometimes, despite all the measures we take, something can go wrong. The worst can happen. Sometimes it's not anything to do with a cyber attack. Sometimes it could just be your server has given up, right? It's just a plain simple hardware failure, but that could have disastrous or catastrophic impact on your business. So it's most important that a robust backup regimen is put in place and validated also regularly. So we recommend that backups are taken minimum daily. There is no good day or bad day for taking backups. It's got to be done every day. And as added measures, separate backups are also recommended to be taken up weekly and monthly. So you take a backup every, let's say, Monday, it's a weekly backup, and a monthly backup, say, on the first of every month of the previous month. Right? So depending on your business, you may want to look at backups being done more frequently in the day. Some business cannot tolerate a failure of even more than 4 hours. Some not even more than an hour. So it all depends on the criticality of your business, how easily you are able to manage without the IT systems, to what extent you can manage data loss. These are the factors that would determine how frequently you can take a backup. But as I mentioned in the previous bullet point, at the very minimum, it's got to be done daily. All 7 days of the week, whether it's a holiday, festival, strike, lockdown, backups need to happen daily. Then we come to the computers. Could be a desktop, could be a laptop, could be even a tab device that some of your staff may be having. All of them need to have some kind of total protection software. Now, why I use the word total protection software? In the past, we've always heard of antivirus software, right? But these days, the threats have gone way beyond the typical virus. These days, malware is installed, ransomware is installed, and so many other kinds of threats are installed. So you need a software that can take care of the entire gamut of attacks. And all these products that I mentioned here, and I'm sure there are some that you may already be using, are or have evolved over the last few years to provide, protection from these various threats. Now, you may be using something else compared to what I mentioned here, which is perfectly fine. But just make sure that what you are using is something that is comprehensive in terms of the kind of threat protection they provide. And they need to be regularly updated. So you would again see over here that, like with the firewall, this total protection software needs to be regularly updated. And all these products have a subscription based model where you subscribe for a year, you get the patches. At the end of the year, you're again asked to subscribe and you pay whatever cost that they are charging. Right? Now, in an organization that has got probably a handful of staff, maybe 10, 20, 30, it's easy to manage the regular updates of the software by having maybe one individual who's tasked with going around ensuring that everything is being updated regularly. But the larger your organization is, the more challenging that becomes. And hence, it becomes important to have something that is centrally managed and controlled, where from one central location, you can connect to all the computers in your network, look at whether all of this total protection software are regularly patched, all up to date. Sometimes emergency patches are rolled out when threats become known and need to be immediately addressed. So you could, through the central software, push out such patches, right? And the facilities that such kind of centrally managed software provide is the ability to add in a few policies, security policies, and push them out to the laptops without your IT person having to go to each and every computer and put in that new configuration. So as an example, some of these security policies are controlling what websites that your staff can access, controlling what software that they can download and install, because these are various ways through which threats can come in. And therefore, having a control over this is equally important. On the last bullet point on the slide, right, ensuring that our computers are regularly updated. Majority of us would probably be using Windows. Some of us may be using Android-based computers. Irrespective of which type of computer, regularly updates come in, and we need to make sure that they are being updated and not being put off. Because these updates are meant to address defects in the software which can be leveraged by these hackers. So keeping them updated is as important. Remember, the hacker is looking for the weakest link in the chain. And any one weak area can take you down, because that's what they will be looking out for and trying to exploit that. All right. Next is On your local laptops or computer desktops. Now, especially in the case of Windows-based computers, Windows 10, Windows 11, or even the earlier versions, the default installation of Windows on these computers provides something called the local admin rights. In other words, that user is the king or queen of their device. They can do anything, even stop the antivirus software or install software which may not be authorized. So it's important that these local admin rights are removed from the user and they are just given standard access on their device. The standard access is good for almost, I would say, 99% of the work. I myself personally practice that. I have my local admin rights removed on my own laptop so that, I'm sure that any software that still manages to crack all the differences will find that it doesn't have any additional rights on my computer to do anything that is malicious. The next point is USB ports. Now here, USB ports are a source of external as well as internal threats. And let me expand on that. So when it comes to the external threats, what could happen is someone takes his portable USB drive, connects it to the device to either copy some software, some Excel or Word files or whatever, from that USB drive onto the laptop, or maybe vice versa. But what he or she may not be aware is on that device, there could be some malicious software where as soon as it gets connected, it gets activated, right? So in most cases, it is recommended to block the USB port. When it comes to the internal threat, what could happen is a disgruntled staff can connect a USB drive, copy all your sensitive data onto the drive, and probably hand over back your laptop in a perfect condition, but unknowns to you, he's taken away all your sensitive data. And you can then understand the consequences of that. So do remember, cybersecurity is not just about external attacks or external threats. There could be threats from within. And you need to look at both external as well as internal threats. Then comes password rotation policy. So what we mean by this, all of us use passwords or are forced to use passwords for different software access. Could be your personal email, could be access to the network. There are several things. Now, over a period of time, what happens, knowingly or unknowingly, there are, just a minute, sorry. So there are instances where, for the sake of personal convenience, some staff tend to share their passwords with their friends and colleagues. And why would this happen? Let's say there is a specific staff who's got to update, let's say, who's in charge of making updates through Icescape. So he's got a user ID, he's got a password. And let's say he's going on vacation or he's fallen sick, he's not able to come to the office. So what he would do, he would just inform his friend or colleague, teammate, अरे इसको काम कर दो, ये मेरा password है. And that's how the password gets shared. And over a period of time, that's how password gets compromised. So it's very important, therefore, that users are forced to change their passwords at regular intervals. These regular intervals could be left to you, could be 45 days, 60 days, 90 days. The industry practices at least once in 90 days, users are forced to change their passwords. So you may see that some of the government portals here in India forces us to change the passwords whenever we log in, because we would have probably accessed them after a big gap. We then have a web filtering software. Now, there are, as you know, millions, if not billions, of websites that are available and that are accessible to you sitting wherever you are. While a lot of websites have good intentions and are designed to ensure that they are providing the kind of service that they have put on the website that they own, there are some websites, the owners of which have malicious intent. And accessing these websites is another source by which a malware or a ransomware can get entry into your network. And hence, there are companies, product vendors, that sell what is called as web filtering software, through which you could centrally control what are the kind of websites that can be accessed. Now, these product vendors also provide the facility or a service, which you would need to subscribe once again, of a database that they regularly update, which then gets installed or updated onto the system where the web filtering software is, so that any new sites that have come up in the internet are registered over there. Any new sites that need to be blocked are also updated into this database. So you don't have to take the trouble of finding out which are these malicious websites and what should be the website that you would typically block. They provide that service to you. You can, of course, always configure it, override it, make exceptions, but then that's a call you would have to take. Right? Finally, engage the services of a security consultant, and this is a third-party security consultant, to do a penetration test of your infrastructure and recommend corrective actions. What does this penetration test do? Now, these security consultants act as hackers who have been trained through well certified and well published courses in order to verify the level of protection of your infrastructure, right? We would not know where are the loopholes, where are the weak areas within our infrastructure. These people have been trained and they have the experience to find these gaps, right? And recommend to you what are the corrective actions that you should do. Now, ideally, and this is what I recommend to people who approach me, is have one service consultant who will do the initial test. And after you have done the recommended corrective actions, you engage another consultant who will verify and validate whether these corrective actions have had the desired effect and outcome, right? So having two different independent perspectives helps. And with that, I conclude my points on the medium and enterprise office. So let's look at the organizations where it's a small office setup, right? Now, in this scenario, there are no firewalls. There are just one or two computers. You don't need to install additional software such as web filtering because you yourself are using that. So there are just three basic points that you need to look at. One is making sure that you're taking a backup, right? Take a backup every day without fail. Have separate devices to take your monthly backup because sometimes these backup devices, which are also hardware based, may fail, right? So you shouldn't land up in a scenario where you've diligently taken all your backup, but when you want to use it, you find that that device has gone bad or it doesn't work properly. So keep at least one additional device where you have your backups taken at least every month or maybe every week. And Windows has a built-in backup software, Windows 7 and higher, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. So you don't need to invest in any additional software to take the backups. All you just need to do is buy a portable drive, and they don't cost much these days. And then again, make sure you have one of the well-known brands of the total protection software, right? You may already have one, which is fine. Just make sure that it's well recognized, provides all the adequate measures that are required, or select something else that provides those capabilities. And finally, ensure that the operating system is regularly updated. This is one of the basic rules that we need to do, irrespective of the type of or the scale of our companies. And then, if you have maybe computers issued to your staff or colleagues, ensure that the local admin rights are removed. And only if they really require that, you give them access to the USB ports that will allow them to take a backup. All right. So that's a judgment call that you would need to take as to who should have access to these USB ports on their computers for backup or for maybe any other purpose. And finally, ensure that they change their passwords at regular intervals. And those regular intervals is something that you would need to come up with based on what you think would be best suited for your company. Okay, so this is for protection on the cloud. Sorry. Now, some companies have their servers hosted on third-party cloud. That's in a data center that maybe is from one of the well-known brands that are there, whose names I'm not going to get into right now. Or it could be a data center run by a service provider to which you have access. Irrespective of the type of the cloud setup that you are using, you need to make sure that the security level is at the same as what I had talked about at length. for your medium level or enterprise scale office, right? Which means that firewall has to be there, a web filtering software has to be there, server hardening needs to be done. So some of these measures come in as part of the default package that they offer to you. Some service providers provide this as additional packages over and top of what you have already taken. So you need to have that discussion with the service provider to see, with the basic package that you have subscribed to, what is it that they offer in terms of security, and therefore what additional packages you may need to buy in order to be adequately protected. And then, like in the previous case, have a third-party consultant do a penetration test, verify and see the level of protection that is there that the service provider currently has, and look at what are the corrective actions that are recommended and have them implemented. And finally, follow it up with another independent review of those corrective measures to see if they provide the desired result. So really, there isn't too much of a difference between what kind of protection you would need to have between the cloud and the setup if you were to have in your office. Obviously, having something in your office means there is more investment that you need to do as against something on the cloud, where the service provider provides that and where he's able to spread that across multiple clients of his. Okay, I talked about these points, the firewall, the server hardening, make sure all that is there. Sometimes the firewalls is provided as a shared infrastructure to multiple clients of theirs. So verify that that is okay with you based on the kind of traffic or load that you expect. And like in the cloud, you would have installed your own bespoke applications, follow the same practices that are there, that was mentioned earlier, where you have your development team ensure that they have designed and written the application by following the best practices of whatever coding language is there, so that those don't provide any avenues for an hacker to come in and either steal the data or take down the software. Okay, so we talked about also having antivirus software. Make sure that for all the computers that are connected on the cloud, they have adequately protected by the total protection software. And this total protection software is regularly updated by getting into an AMC contract with the vendor. And also that the computers that are being connected to the server on the cloud are regularly updated by the Windows updates that come in from the product vendor. Then let us look at what is the protection that we have or we need to implement for those users at home. Now, it is strongly recommended that those users at home do not use their personal computers, because there is no control over what happens on those personal computers, what kind of safety measures are there on those personal computers, and who could be the other people that may be using the same personal computers, right? No exceptions are to be granted on any of this protection setup, they should always use the official laptop and whatever protection measures that come up with. And as far as backup goes, if you have fairly good confidence and trust into that particular employee, you could allow them to use a portable USB drive, or alternatively, there are nowadays cloud-based drives such as Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox, and many others, but these are the more well-known, that allows you to do a backup automatically of all the data that is there on your laptop or desktop. So this ensures that there is no access to the external USB drive and the data is safely protected by being backed up daily and automatically. That would be the ideal case of taking care of backups of data. Now, there are some non-IT security policies that one needs to also look into it. And these are something that most people don't pay attention to. First is a clean disk. And what I mean by a clean disk, it doesn't mean something that is free of dust. It's something that is where there is no papers that are just left scattered on that particular workstation or cubicle. Because sometimes there is a tendency for some people to write something confidential on these papers. Could be a password, could be something else, could be some sensitive data. And then they write it on the paper, leave it there, forget about it. And someone else could pass by, see that, and exploit that. These are various ways through which exploits happen. So nothing to do with software, but sheer carelessness on part of that particular user. So you need to ensure that you have a clean desk policy which states that at the end of the working day, every staff destroys such papers or they file it under lock and key if necessary. And then finally, document confidentiality tagging. Now, what I mean by this is making sure that every document that is produced within the company has a tagging that indicates to what extent this document can be circulated. So this document, a document could be publicly shared openly on the internet. Some documents can be shared within the company like an HR policy, right? Some documents specific to a particular client or a project has to be restricted to only those people working for that client or on that project. So having that tagging helps make sure that when you see such a document printed and in the hands of someone that shouldn't be having that, you can immediately take, what kind of corrective actions you need to take to prevent further leakage of such sensitive information. And so on to my final slide. You need to have an IT policy, and I just want to differentiate between cybersecurity policy and IT policy. An IT policy here is a documented password policy. And what I mean by a password policy, you may have seen that there are a lot of portals where they insist on a password being 8 characters, or sometimes having a capital letter, or a mix of alphabets and numbers and a special character. So choose one that works for you. And as part of this policy, you would also mention how frequently it needs to be changed. Right? And publish a category of sites that are not accessible. There are, of course, the obvious ones we are aware of, but there are some which are not so obvious. So it's best to make sure that they are published. And better still, if you are able to afford a web filtering software, then make sure that these are included in the block list so that they can't be accessed in the first place. Then specify the list of software that can be installed and used on the computer. For most of us, Microsoft Office would just about be the only software that we would need to install over and above what comes with the basic computer. They could be, for some people, software specific to a terminal or a principal or a shipping company that you need to install. So it's good to make sure that those are published. And as I mentioned in the previous slides, if possible, ensuring that the list of published or approved software is controlled through the total protection software control management tool, so that centrally you can decide what software can be installed. Finally, putting in place a framework where you are able to report phishing attacks, spam mails, etc. It's important that you inform your users what they need to do when they see a suspicious mail, because some of these suspicious mail are ways in which phishing attacks are made, which will provide another avenue for these hackers to get into your network and cause damage. So it's important that users are informed how to detect these kind of phishing mails and who to report to when they see such kind of phishing emails or spam mails coming through. Right? And then make sure that these policies are being complied with, because it's no good just publishing a document and leaving it at that. There needs to be regular assessments that are done, and you will always find that there are some staff who are not fully compliant, in which case corrective measures need to be taken. And it's left to you all to decide what are those corrective measures, because there could be some staff who are regularly not complying, in which case another kind of corrective measure may need to be taken. Right? So in conclusion, one can never be too safe. It's better to err on the side of caution by maybe putting in more measures, security measures that you may think is adequate. And while this presentation and a document, a more comprehensive document which we will publish to all of you all, gives or provides most of the measures that are recommended by the industry, some may not be adequate for the kind of company you own and manage. So always speak with your IT consultant and get the complete picture. Always assess the level of compliance, as I mentioned, not just with your users, but even in the other areas, and take immediate actions. And finally, no matter what kind of measures we put in, as I mentioned right at the beginning, no one can guarantee that cybersecurity threats can be eliminated. We can reduce them. The insurance policy is there for that rainy day or for that disastrous day, when despite all your best intentions, besides all the measures you have taken in, a threat has finally managed to break in and cause havoc. So an insurance policy is there to take care of those bad times or bad days. Right? With that, I complete my presentation and open to questions.
Thank you very much, Clarence, for that lovely presentation. It is really an eye-opener, because there are very small things which we end up missing. And I mean, this was really a very, very informative session for all of us. So
Thank
one
you.
of the questions, I'll just take a few questions which are there.
Sure.
One of the question one of the members have asked is that, is AnyDesk a safe, is it a safe app to access server?
Okay. So, Manoj, I think the question was from Manoj, right? So, Manoj, there are numerous articles which cast aspersions on AnyDesk by saying that it's not adequately safe. And there are other products like TeamViewer. I personally use TeamViewer within the organization. And why most people gravitate to AnyDesk is because it's free. Remember, there is nothing free in our world. There is something that the product vendor is looking for from you. And what kind of thing he's looking in return is anyone's guess, right? TeamViewer is a subscription-based model. It's better to pay a little bit amount and be more safe than using something that is altogether free. I'm not saying that all free products are bad products. No, don't get me wrong. But if you read articles, and I think you yourself have that doubt, AnyDesk, there are some question marks around AnyDesk. Let's put it that way.
Another question which we've received is that, does the firewall work on phishing messages?
No. And that is where the challenge is there, even for companies with multi-million-dollar IT budgets. A mail comes in, innocent, very innocent looking mail, and it's a mail. So the firewall cannot do anything about it. It might say, your mailbox is getting full, click on this link to expand the mailbox size. Your courier has come and it will have DHL logo, exact DHL logo. There are various ways in which these smart people can come through you and pounce on your unsuspecting user.
So phishing mails, you've already covered a little bit on that, but could have a little discussion on them. And like you just stated 2 examples, this is one of the most common issues. And there are so many unknown messages which are coming. I mean, it will just have a performer invoice attached, or
Right.
I mean, could have a bit more discussion on what
Sure.
kind.
So on phishing emails, now what you need to look at is the sender address on the face of it may be something that is known to you. But if you look at their email address, they could have a very small variation that helps you find out that they are not who they claim to be. So for example, let's say that I get an email, George_ABRAO at abrogroups.com, right? So one will just look ABRAO group and say, अच्छा, boss से कुछ mail आया, देख लेंगे. but not paying attention that that email address has got one character which is slightly different, which would miss the attention of people. Sometimes people check the mail on their phone. Sometimes while speaking with someone, click on the mail, open it, try to do multitasking. So look at that. Second thing is mail that you're seeing for the first time, a pro forma invoice, courier being received, mailbox is full and you need to increase the size of mailbox. Be a little bit patient. Don't take the action that they want you to do. Check with your IT team, right? Let them have a look at the email. Let them tell you, yes, it's safe or not, and then proceed. Sometimes we are in a rush. As I said, we're trying to do 2 or 3 different tasks. We click and then we suffer. So when you see such mails, just take a moment, keep everything aside, focus fully on the mail, look at where it's coming from. These few telltale signs like the email address may sound almost similar, but will always have something that gives them away.
Okay. One more question which we've received is that what is the 3-2-1 rule of backup? If you can.
I'm not sure what he means by 3-2-1 rule of backup, but this is something that is widely followed in the industry, and let me explain what is done. So backups normally are taken every day, as I had mentioned in my presentation, but then they are taken every day on different devices. So you have a Monday backup device, a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So should one device gets compromised or fails, you have the previous day. So today we are on Saturday. So you could always go to the Friday backup device and restore your data. Then there is also a weekly backup device where every Sunday you take backup of the data, which is basically a snapshot, but you know that this is the backup of the last week or the previous week. And these devices are then kept in rotation. So you have week 1 backup device, week 2 backup device, week 3, week 4. So you rotate them. You have different devices, one for every week. And finally, you have the monthly backup device where you take backups at the end of every month. So you have a January device, February device, March device, and so on. These are various ways to ensure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So you may take backups regularly, but if that device fails, then I don't know who can help you.
One last question, which is in fact more of a personal question, I'd say,
So,
is that people when they read their emails, they use a preview pane on
right.
instead of opening up every email. Let's say when they're accessing on Outlook or something.
Yeah.
Is that a safe mode? I mean,
That's safe because you're just viewing the mail, but you're not clicking on anything which the mail sender is trying to provoke you, seduce you, cajole you in doing, right?
so there are no automatic cache or something which gets downloaded when a preview pane is kept on.
So what would normally happen is if you see some of the software, especially Outlook, you have the option to not download or image or attachment when you open it. And that's there for a reason, because sometimes you never know the image or the attachment when you open the mail also gets downloaded into your computer, right? And you never know, later on you might click on that image or you might click on that attachment, which will then cause havoc. So some of the email clients have the option where you can say download images or attachments only when you click on some link. So that's a choice that you will have to make.
That is it. Thank you so much, Clarence, and over to Harish.
Thanks, Clarence. That was a wonderful session. Knowledgeable. You tried to make it as simple as possible for everyone like us to understand. You know, it's very difficult for us to understand all the technical words and jargons that are used by, people of your caliber. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense to us now, and also shows us the importance of why we should be looking at this very seriously. And the most important part was thank you for covering, the small companies, the
Yes.
individuals, and the medium-sized and large companies, because it gives a prospectus to our people, our members, that we are not doing things only for any particular one, but everybody who is a member of
Right.
AMTOI. So on behalf of AMTOI, Managing Committee, the Training Committee, and all our members, thank you very much. It was a wonderful session.
My pleasure.
We may ask you for a few more such sessions if people come
Yes.
up with
Absolutely.
And yeah, at AMTOI, we don't believe in this. We always believe in coming forward and saying, we need help, please come. So thank you again. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking time on a Saturday. Thank you very much. Have a great day ahead and a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for making this.
Thanks, Clarence.
Thank you. Thank you, Vasant. Thank you, Priya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.